Welcome back, and thank you for tuning in to HK Cheating Stories. We appreciate each and every one of you joining us. Where in the world are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. Now, let's get the story started. I never thought my marriage would end in a stranger's driveway at 3 a.m. But there I was, gripping the steering wheel, watching my wife walk back into a house filled with men eager to take what was supposed to be mine. My name is David Carter, and this is the story of how I discovered the woman I loved had been living a secret life, one that shattered everything I believed in. What would you do if your partner looked you in the eyes and told you one night of betrayal didn't matter? I had a choice to make, and trust me, I made the right one. I should have known something was off the moment we pulled into the driveway. The Miller's house was bigger than I expected, a sprawling two-story home with cars lined up along the street. Jake and Sarah Miller, Emily's longtime friends, had invited us to their party, claiming it was just a casual get-together. I hadn't thought much of it at the time. But now, standing on their front steps, I noticed how oddly excited Emily seemed, a slight smirk playing at the corners of her lips. I dismissed the feeling, chalking it up to her usual love of social gatherings. I had no idea this night would destroy everything I thought I knew about my marriage. Inside, the house was filled with people, couples laughing, sipping wine, chatting in small groups. It all seemed normal at first. I recognized a few faces from previous events Emily had dragged me to, but there were plenty of strangers as well. The atmosphere was different. There was an energy in the air, an undercurrent of something unspoken. "Go get a drink, loosen up," Emily said, giving me a small push toward the bar. I did as she suggested, pouring myself a whiskey. I was never the social butterfly she was, so I figured I'd sip my drink, make some small talk, and we'd be home in a couple of hours. But as the night went on, I started noticing little things, whispers exchanged between couples, lingering touches, the way certain guests kept glancing at their watches like they were waiting for something. Then, I overheard a conversation near the patio. You know the rules. Once the keys are in the bowl, there's no backing out. My stomach twisted. At first, I thought I had misheard. I turned to Emily, who was standing just a few feet away, laughing at something Sarah had said. I grabbed her arm, pulling her aside. "What's going on here?" I asked, my voice low. She looked at me innocently, as if I had just asked her the most ridiculous question in the world. "What do you mean?" "This party," I hissed. "Why does it feel like everyone is waiting for something?" She sighed, as if she had been expecting this. "David, relax. It's just a tradition they have." "What kind of tradition?" Her lips curled into a small, knowing smile. "At the end of the night, the wives put their house keys into a bowl. The husbands pick one. Whatever key they pull, well, that's who they spend the night with." The room around me seemed to close in. I stared at her, waiting for her to laugh, to tell me she was joking. But she wasn't. She was completely serious. "You knew about this?" I asked, my voice dangerously low. Emily shrugged, unfazed. "Yes. And you didn't think to tell me?" She took a sip of her drink, her expression completely calm. "No, because I knew you wouldn't come if I did." I gritted my teeth, my pulse pounding in my ears. "You were just going to go along with this? Let some guy pick your key and take you home." "It's just one night, David," she said smoothly. "It doesn't mean anything. It's just fun." I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake her, to make her understand how utterly insane this was. "Our marriage means something to me, Emily," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "And I'm not sharing my wife with anyone." She rolled her eyes. "You're overreacting." "Overreacting?" I nearly laughed. "You were planning to sleep with another man tonight, and I'm overreacting?" She leaned in closer, her eyes gleaming. "You could pick another woman, too. We could both have fun." I felt physically ill. I had been married to this woman for 10 years. We had built a life together, a home. We had children. And now, she was looking at me like I was the problem for not wanting to be part of her sick little game. I took a step back. "We're leaving. Now." Her expression darkened. "David, don't do this. You're embarrassing me." "I don't give a damn about your embarrassment," I snapped. "Let's go." She crossed her arms, glaring at me, but I didn't wait for her to comply. I grabbed her wrist, firm but not rough, and pulled her toward the living room. The crowd had gathered, a large glass bowl sitting in the center of the coffee table, filled with keys. The men stood around it, drinks in hand, while the women waited, watching. I stormed toward the table and plunged my hand into the bowl, Yanking out the key I recognized immediately. Our house key, marked with the small, blue keychain I had bought Emily years ago. Holding it up, I turned to face the room. I wasn't informed about tonight's arrangement, I said loudly. And I sure as hell won't be sharing my wife with anyone. A few people chuckled awkwardly. Others exchanged glances, clearly irritated by my outburst. Emily's face turned red, but not with shame. No, she was angry. You just ruined everything, she hissed under her breath. I turned to her, my heart pounding with finality. No, Emily, you did. The room fell into silence. I gave her a choice. Come home with me now, or stay here and never come back. I watched her closely, hoping, praying, she would come to her senses. Instead, she squared her shoulders, plastered a tight smile on her lips, and turned back to the crowd. I'm sorry for my husband's behavior, she announced. I'd love to stay, but I suppose it's best if I leave. Reluctantly, she followed me out of the house. The entire drive home, she didn't say a word, but I could feel it, the seething rage radiating off her. She wasn't angry at herself. She was angry at me, and I had this sinking feeling that this wasn't over. The drive home was pure hell. Emily sat in the passenger seat, arms crossed so tightly that it looked like she was holding herself together. The glow of the streetlights flashed across her face, illuminating her furious expression. She hadn't spoken a word since we left the Miller's house, but I could feel the storm brewing beside me. I kept my hands tight on the wheel, my knuckles white. My mind was still spinning from what had just happened. The shock, the betrayal, the fact that my wife had planned to sleep with another man tonight and had been angry that I stopped her. The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. Then, just as I turned onto our street, she finally snapped. You humiliated me. Her voice was sharp, cutting through the tense air like a blade. I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. I humiliated you. Emily turned in her seat, her eyes blazing. Yes, David. You completely embarrassed me in front of everyone. We'll never be invited to one of their parties again. I clenched my jaw so hard it hurt. Are you listening to yourself right now? You're upset about a party invitation when you were literally about to go to bed with another man? It's not like that, she snapped back. It's just a game, David. It doesn't mean anything. I slammed on the brakes so hard the tires screeched against the pavement. Emily lurched forward, bracing herself against the dashboard as I threw the car into park right in the middle of the empty street. I turned to her, my chest rising and falling with deep, controlled breaths. Say that again. She stared at me, confused. Go ahead, Emily, I said, my voice eerily calm. Tell me it doesn't mean anything, that I'm overreacting, that I'm the one who ruined the night, not you. For the first time, hesitation flickered across her face. But it was fleeting. I just needed something different, David, she said, her voice softening. One night. That's all. It wouldn't have changed anything between us. I laughed. A hollow, humorless laugh that sent a chill down even my own spine. It changes everything between us, I shot back. One night? That's all it takes to destroy a marriage, Emily. One night to rip apart everything we've built for the last 10 years. She exhaled sharply, frustration flashing across her face. You're being dramatic. I turned the car around so fast she yelped, grabbing onto the door handle. David, what the hell are you doing? She shouted as I sped back toward the Miller's house. I didn't answer. My grip tightened on the wheel, my heart hammering in my chest. David, stop. Are you even listening to me? She shrieked. Oh, I hear you loud and clear, I said through gritted teeth. You said you needed one night, right? That it didn't mean anything? Well, here's your chance. She went pale. What are you saying? I pulled up to the curb outside the Miller's house and threw the car into park. I'm saying if it means that much to you, go ahead. Get out of the car and go back in. Emily's lips parted slightly, as if she was about to speak, but no words came out. Go on, I said, gesturing toward the front door. Find someone to give you what I apparently can't. She swallowed hard, her fingers still gripping the door handle. You're being cruel. I leaned back, staring straight ahead. No, Emily. You were cruel when you made this choice before I even knew it was an option. Her hand trembled slightly as she hesitated. For a brief second, I thought, hoped, she would break down, realize what she had done, and beg me to take her home. But instead, she turned to me with an unreadable expression. Can you pick me up in the morning? The words hit me like a sledgehammer. I closed my eyes, forcing down the wave of nausea threatening to rise. Then, I exhaled slowly and shook my head. No, Emily. Whoever you end up with tonight, I'm sure he'll be happy to take you home. Her expression soured. You make it sound so dirty. I finally turned to look at her, my gaze cold and unyielding. That's because it is. She sighed, running a hand through her hair. It's just one night, David. I shook my head. Even 1 second would be too much. Silence stretched between us again. Then, after what felt like an eternity, she finally moved. Emily pushed open the car door and stepped out. She didn't look back. She didn't say goodbye. She simply walked up the Miller's driveway and disappeared through the front door. I sat there for a long time, my hands still gripping the wheel, my mind unable to process what had just happened. Then, slowly, my hands relaxed. My heart didn't race anymore. The pain was still there, but something else had settled in, something colder. Clarity. I wasn't going to fight for her. I wasn't going to beg her to come home. Because the woman I married, the woman I had built a life with, had died the moment she stepped through that door. With a deep breath, I shifted the car into drive and pulled away, leaving her and our marriage behind. I drove aimlessly for what felt like hours. The streetlights blurred past, my grip tight on the wheel, my mind racing. The weight of what had just happened pressed down on my chest like a lead weight. Emily was gone. She had made her choice. I should have felt rage, fury, hatred, but all I felt was nothing. A hollow emptiness where love used to be. It wasn't just that she had chosen another man. It was how easily she had done it, how effortlessly she had let go of us. I pulled over into an empty gas station parking lot, resting my forehead against the steering wheel, my breathing shallow. I needed air. I needed to think. And then, my phone buzzed. For half a second, hope flickered in my chest. Maybe she had come to her senses. Maybe she was calling to tell me it was a mistake, that she wanted to come home. I grabbed my phone and checked the screen. But it wasn't Emily. It was a number I didn't recognize. Frowning, I answered. Hello. David. Hey man, it's Ted. I clenched my jaw. Ted Lawson. One of the guys at the party. My stomach twisted. What do you want? I asked, my voice flat. Ted chuckled. Relax, man. Emily gave me your number. She wanted me to call and tell you. Well, she really hopes you'll come back. My grip on the phone tightened. She said she's excited for tonight. Thinks you should join in. I squeezed my eyes shut, while rising in my throat. You're a lucky guy, you know? Ted continued, his voice smug. Every man here is hoping to pull her key. She's been telling everyone that tonight is going to be unforgettable. A sharp pain shot through my chest. This wasn't just a mistake. This wasn't just one night. This was planned. She wanted this. I gritted my teeth, my entire body shaking with adrenaline. Screw you, Ted. Ted laughed. Oh, come on, man. Don't be so uptight. Just think about it. There are some really attractive women here, ready to. I hung up. I didn't need to hear another word. For a moment, I just sat there, the silence deafening. My phone, still clutched in my hand, felt like it weighed 100 pounds. And then, something in me snapped. I started the engine and gunned it down the road, my tires screeching against the pavement. I wasn't sure where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay still. Everything about tonight was a lie. Emily's promises. Our marriage. The life I thought we had built together. I was done. By the time I pulled into our driveway, my hands were steady. My mind was clear. I walked into the house, the silence pressing down on me. The space felt different now, empty, like something had been ripped out of it. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed a suitcase from the closet and started packing. Clothes, toiletries, my laptop, my important documents. Anything I would need for at least a couple of weeks. I wasn't coming back. As I zipped up the suitcase, my eyes landed on the nightstand. On the framed wedding photo of Emily and me, her beaming in her white dress, me standing beside her, proud and in love. I picked up the frame, stared at it for a long moment. Then I dropped it. The glass shattered on impact, the sound echoing through the house. I didn't flinch. Instead, I moved to the dresser, yanking open the top drawer. My fingers brushed against something cold and metallic, my wedding ring. I slid it off my finger, rolling it between my thumb and forefinger. 10 years. 10 years of trust, loyalty, commitment. 10 years that meant nothing to her. With a sudden, sharp movement, I grabbed a hammer from the toolbox in the closet. I placed the ring on the dresser, raised the hammer high, and slammed it down. The metal bent under the force of the blow. I hit it again, and again, until the once perfect circle was nothing more than a twisted, broken scrap of gold. I picked up the ruined ring, walked to the bed, and placed it on Emily's pillow. Then, I reached for our marriage certificate. I held it in my hands for a moment, letting my fingers run over the official lettering, the embossed seal. Then I tore it. 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces. I placed the shredded remains next to the ring. A final message. A final goodbye. I grabbed my suitcase, locked the front door behind me, and walked away without looking back. That was the night I stopped being Emily's husband. The night she lost everything. I checked into a rundown motel just outside of town. The neon sign flickered in and out, casting an eerie glow across the nearly empty parking lot. It was the kind of place where people disappeared for a while, where no one asked questions. Perfect. I paid for a week in cash, took my key, and headed to my room. It wasn't much, a small bed, a battered nightstand, a TV that looked older than I was, but it didn't matter. I wasn't here for comfort. I was here to escape. I tossed my suitcase onto the bed, sat down heavily, and ran my hands through my hair. My chest ached, my body exhausted from the night's events, but my mind wouldn't shut off. Emily was gone. My marriage was over. And yet, deep down, I still clung to a sliver of hope that she would realize what she had done, that she would come crawling back, begging for forgiveness, swearing that it had all been a mistake. I needed that hope to die. I reached into the mini fridge, pulled out a beer, and cracked it open. The first sip burned as it slid down my throat. The second sip was easier. By the time I was halfway through, my phone buzzed. I froze. Slowly, I pulled it from my pocket and glanced at the screen. Emily. I stared at the name, my finger hovering over the decline button. But at the last second, I let it ring, waiting for the voicemail. A few seconds later, the notification popped up. I took a deep breath and pressed play. Her voice filled the room. Soft, sultry, completely unfazed. David, you're being so childish. I clenched my jaw. Ted told me what you said. How many times do I have to tell you? It's just one night. My fingers curled into a fist. I'll let one guy have me for a few hours, and it doesn't make me immoral. Sure, it might sting a little, but I'll make it up to you in ways you can't even imagine when I get home tomorrow. A sick feeling twisted in my stomach. She wasn't sorry. She didn't regret a damn thing. You probably don't care, but since you pulled our key from the bowl, they gave me another one. Her voice took on an amused tone. The guy who got it is named Brian. He seems nice. Married with kids, too. He promised he wouldn't pressure me. I squeezed my eyes shut, but I couldn't stop listening. Since you're at our place, I went with him. His wife and her boyfriend are in another room, so we won't disturb them when things get heated. She let out a light laugh. You know how vocal I get when you touch me. I slammed the beer can onto the nightstand, my breathing ragged. Mark, I know you're upset, but I promise I won't let him do anything we haven't done. Like that was supposed to make it better. I told Brian we should keep it simple. Maybe stick to the usual positions. He's been with me a few times, mostly missionary, but we might mix it up a little. He agreed, especially since it's my first time with another man. I felt like I was going to be sick. He'll drive me home tomorrow, and I'll shower and freshen up before I come back to you. No leftovers for you, baby. Sweet dreams. Love you, David. Get ready for some excitement when I see you in the morning. The voicemail ended. Silence. For a long time, I just sat there, the phone heavy in my hand. The words replayed over and over in my mind, each one twisting the knife deeper into my gut. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a lapse in judgment. This was who she was. She wasn't the woman I had married. That woman, the one who vowed to love and cherish me, was gone. In her place was a stranger who laughed as she destroyed our family. I should have ignored her message. I should have deleted it and moved on. But I couldn't. I hit dial. She picked up after the third ring, her voice breathless. Hey, babe. In the background, I could hear faint rustling. A low murmur. Brian. I gritted my teeth. Shut up, Emily. She went silent. This is the last time you'll hear from me, I said, my voice like ice. You have no idea what you've done, but you're about to find out. David, enjoy your night with Brian, because when you wake up tomorrow, our marriage is over. A sharp intake of breath. What? You're finished, Emily. Her voice cracked. David, wait. I hung up. 30 seconds later, my phone buzzed again. I didn't answer. Another voicemail. This time, her voice was shaking. David, why are you doing this? How can you say those things to me? I'm your wife. I clenched my jaw. Brian and I are just getting started, and now you're ruining everything. I don't even know if I can enjoy being with him now. My stomach churned. We're not getting divorced. I'll be home tomorrow, and we can talk this out. I'd come home now, but I promised Brian I'd be with him tonight. Please try to understand. Then, in a hushed whisper, oh God, yes. Brian's ready. I have to go. I love you, David. I'll always love you. See you in the morning. I couldn't breathe. I stared at my phone, the finality of it all sinking in. She was gone. Whatever love I had left for her was gone too. I dialed her number one last time, but this time, it rang and went to voicemail. She was too busy with Brian now. Emily, I said, my voice hollow. You broke my heart, and I'll never forgive you for it. You've kept your promise to Brian, but you couldn't keep your vows to me. From here on out, you can be with as many men as you like, but you've lost me forever. I ended the call. She never called back, and I knew why. Because once Emily gave herself to someone, she gave herself completely. And tonight, she belonged to Brian. I woke up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, the weight of Emily's last voicemail still pressing down on my chest like a boulder. My throat was dry, my hands shaking as I reached for the half-empty beer can on the nightstand. The motel room was pitch black, save for the dim glow of the alarm clock blinking 3:17 a.m. She hadn't called back. Of course, she hadn't. By now, she was probably curled up in Brian's arms, whispering all the things she used to say to me. Maybe she was still in the heat of it, moaning his name the way she had once moaned mine. I felt sick. I swung my legs over the edge of the bed, pressing my palms against my forehead. The rage, the humiliation, the betrayal, they were all there, simmering beneath the surface, but for the first time since the night began, my mind was clear. This wasn't just about what she had done. This was about what I was going to do next. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I needed. Sandra Reynolds, one of the best divorce attorneys in Mississippi. I had never thought I'd need her, but now she was going to be my lifeline. I didn't hesitate. I typed out a message. David, I need to file for divorce. Immediately. Infidelity is involved. Can we meet first thing in the morning? I hit send and tossed the phone onto the bed. There was no turning back now. The next morning, I met Sandra at her office in downtown Jackson. The second I stepped inside, she gave me a long, knowing look. You look like hell. I let out a dry chuckle. Feel like it too. She motioned for me to sit, flipping open a legal pad. Tell me everything. So I did. I told her about the party, the key swapping, the way Emily had planned it all behind my back. I told her about the voicemails, the way she had laughed while spitting on our marriage vows. By the time I was done, Sandra was shaking her head in disbelief. Jesus Christ, David. She admitted everything in a voicemail. I nodded. Every last detail. Sandra leaned forward, tapping her pen against the desk. That voicemail is your golden ticket. Mississippi is an at-fault divorce state. That means if we prove she committed adultery, you could avoid alimony and possibly gain full custody of your kids. My chest tightened. My kids. For a moment, I had almost forgotten the worst part of all this. Natalie, Emma, and little Mark Jr., they had no idea their mother had destroyed our family in a single night. What are my chances of keeping them? I asked, my voice quieter now. Sandra sighed. That depends. Has Emily ever been reckless around them? Put them in dangerous situations? I thought about it. Emily had always been a good mother. At least, she had been before last night. But something inside me knew that if she was willing to throw away 10 years of marriage for a thrill, what else was she capable of? I took a deep breath. She hasn't brought men around them yet. But after last night, I wouldn't put it past her. Sandra nodded. Then we build our case. We use the voicemail, the evidence of her infidelity, and we fight for custody. I nodded. And the house. She smirked. We'll make sure she gets the house, but you'll get your money. I'll see to that. I exhaled slowly, nodding. It was a start. A small victory in a war that had only just begun. That afternoon, I made another call, this time to Doug and Liam. Doug was a financial consultant. Liam was a lawyer. We had been close friends since college, but our conversations had always been about business, never about revenge. Until now. We met at a beachside bar just outside of town. The second I sat down, they could tell something was wrong. Jesus, man, Doug said, studying me. What the hell happened to you? I downed my whiskey in one gulp before answering. Emily cheated on me, and she doesn't regret it. Liam let out a low whistle. Damn, that's rough. It gets worse, I muttered. She did it at a key party with a bunch of other married couples. And she actually thought I'd be okay with it. Doug and Liam exchanged a look. She'd admitted this? Liam asked carefully. I slid my phone across the table. It's all in there. Voicemails, texts, everything. Doug scrolled through them, his face darkening. This is insanity. Liam leaned forward. So what's your plan? I clenched my jaw. Divorce. Full custody of the kids. And I exhaled, my voice turning colder. I want every single person involved in that key party to suffer. Doug grinned. Now that we can work with. Liam nodded. We can't go after them legally, unless there are minors or coercion involved, but we can ruin them socially. Doug tapped his fingers against the table. A journalist friend of mine has been itching for a scandal. If we feed him enough details about these key parties, he could blow this whole thing wide open. I smirked. Perfect. Liam clinked his glass against mine. To justice. I took a long, slow sip of my drink, the first real satisfaction I had felt in days. Emily thought she had won. She thought she could cheat, laugh in my face, and walk away without consequences. She had no idea what was coming. And by the time I was done, neither she, nor anyone at that damn party, would ever recover. By Friday morning, everything was in motion. I had spent the past few days making sure every piece of my plan was airtight. My divorce case was being built brick by brick under Sandra's careful guidance. Doug had successfully moved a chunk of my assets into protected accounts, shielding my money from whatever Emily might try to claim in the settlement. But the real bomb was about to drop, the exposure of the key party circle. Liam's journalist contact, a guy named Chris Dalton, was already deep into his investigation. Over the past few nights, he had staked out the Miller house, snapping photos of prominent couples sneaking in and out like teenagers breaking curfew. The scandal was about to explode. That afternoon, I sat in my motel room, watching the rain lash against the window, my phone lying on the table beside me. I was waiting for one call, just one call, to confirm that Emily had been served with divorce papers. Then, at exactly 2:30 p.m., my phone rang. I picked it up. David. Sandra's voice was smooth, professional, but I could hear the satisfaction underneath. Yeah, it's done. Emily has been served. I exhaled slowly, gripping the edge of the table. How did she take it? I asked. Sandra let out a short laugh. Well, let's just say she didn't see it coming. She thought you were bluffing. I closed my eyes. Of course she did. Emily always thought she could charm her way out of anything, that she could do whatever she wanted, and I'd always be waiting for her. Not this time. Expect her to call you, Sandra continued. And when she does, don't engage. Let her rant. Let her scream. Let her beg. But don't give her an inch. We're in control now. Understood. I hung up. And like clockwork, 3 minutes later, my phone rang again. Emily. I let it ring. I wasn't going to pick up. Not yet. A voicemail popped up, and I pressed play. Her voice was pure rage. What did you do, David? She shrieked, her voice breaking. Divorce papers? Are you out of your damn mind? I told you it was just one night. That doesn't mean our marriage is over. I leaned back, listening to her unravel. You don't get to just throw everything away over this, she continued, her voice frantic. You swore to love me forever, David. You can't just erase me from your life over one stupid night. I exhaled slowly. That's where she was wrong. I already had. I deleted the voicemail without responding. She called again an hour later. Another voicemail, this time her voice thick with desperation. Please, David, she sobbed. Please just talk to me. We can fix this. You're my husband, my best friend. I can't lose you. Funny. She didn't sound like that when she was climbing into another man's bed. I deleted the message. That night, I met up with Liam and Chris at a bar downtown. Chris had just finished putting the final touches on his exposé, the article that would rip open the dirty little wife-swapping world Emily had thrown herself into. It's hitting the front page on Sunday, Chris announced, taking a swig of his beer. The city's never seen a scandal like this before. The Parkers, the Millers, even a few politicians. It's going to be chaos. Liam smirked. You're going to make a lot of enemies with this one. Chris shrugged. Good. Makes the job interesting. I sat back, letting the moment settle. It was almost poetic. Emily's betrayal was about to become public knowledge. She had humiliated me. Now, the whole city would know exactly who she was. There's one last thing, Chris added. I need a quote from you, David. Just a short statement. I thought about it for a moment. Then, I leaned forward, my voice steady. Actions have consequences, and some choices can never be undone. Chris grinned. Perfect. We clinked our glasses together. Emily had made her choice, and by Sunday morning, she'd have to live with it. Sunday morning arrived like the calm before a storm, but I knew better. The storm had already been unleashed. I sat in my motel room, the bitter taste of black coffee lingering on my tongue, my phone vibrating nonstop on the nightstand. I didn't need to check the screen. I knew exactly who was calling. The newspaper had hit the front page. I reached for the folded copy sitting beside me, slowly smoothing it out across the cheap motel desk. The bold, capitalized letters at the top were impossible to miss. Beneath the headline was a blurred image of people sneaking in and out of Jake and Sarah Miller's house, captured by Chris Dalton's camera over the past few weeks. Their faces weren't clear, but it didn't matter. In a town like ours, recognition didn't require clarity. As I read through the article, my stomach tightened, not from regret, but from a twisted sense of justice. Chris hadn't held back. He described, in excruciating detail, the ritual of the key parties, the married couples who participated, and the utter lack of remorse displayed by those involved. My story was woven into it, though my name remained anonymous. Just a betrayed husband, a man who had discovered his wife's secret life in the worst possible way. And now, the world knew. Emily had wanted her night of excitement. She had wanted to feel desired, to bask in the attention of another man. Well, now she had everyone's attention. The city had erupted into outrage. I didn't have to check social media or listen to the radio to know that people were talking about it everywhere, at coffee shops, gas stations, church parking lots. Husbands and wives were questioning each other, scanning the article, wondering if their own neighbors or friends had been involved. Marriages were on the brink. Families were collapsing. And for those who had participated, denial wouldn't save them now. The scandal was too big to ignore. My phone continued to vibrate, but I ignored it, letting the calls go to voicemail. I had no interest in listening, at least not yet. Instead, I threw on a jacket, grabbed my keys, and stepped outside into the crisp morning air. I needed to see the aftermath for myself. As I drove through town, I caught glimpses of the damage. At the local diner, a group of older women sat in the corner, whispering frantically over their morning coffee, their eyes darting to a couple seated by the window. The man had his hands clenched into fists on the table, his wife staring down at her lap, avoiding his gaze. At the gas station, two men were arguing in hushed but heated tones, one of them gripping a newspaper so tightly his knuckles had gone white. This wasn't just about me anymore. The divorce papers were officially filed. The scandal had spread like wildfire, consuming everything in its path. By Monday morning, the fallout was unavoidable. Families were crumbling, careers were ruined, and relationships were shattered beyond repair. Emily had called me 5 more times since our meeting at the motel, but I hadn't answered. There was nothing left to say. By Wednesday, my lawyer Sandra informed me that Emily had agreed to joint custody of the kids. She would have them on weekends, and I'd have them during the week. It wasn't the perfect outcome, but it was one I could live with. I needed them close. I needed to make sure they were protected from the wreckage their mother had caused. When Friday came, I drove to the house, the one I had left behind, to drop the kids off. As I pulled into the driveway, my chest tightened. This house had once been my home, a place filled with laughter, love, and warmth. Now, it was a stranger's house, a hollow shell of what it used to be. Emily opened the door before I could even unbuckle my seatbelt. She looked exhausted. Dark circles clung beneath her eyes, and her usual confident posture was gone, replaced by something I had never seen in her before. Defeat. The kids ran to her, and she hugged them tightly, whispering soft reassurances. I watched, my expression unreadable. No matter what she had done, she was still their mother. That would never change. But I had. As I helped unload their bags, Emily hesitated near the doorway. I could feel her eyes on me, filled with an unspoken plea. David, she murmured, barely above a whisper. Can we talk? I let out a slow breath, adjusting my grip on the suitcase. There's nothing left to talk about, Emily. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for the strap of her sweater, as if she needed something, anything, to hold on to. I know you hate me, she said, voice unsteady. I don't blame you. but I need you to know that I never stopped loving you." I studied her for a long moment. The woman standing in front of me wasn't the same one who had walked back into that house that night, throwing away our marriage like it was nothing. But it didn't matter. "Maybe you do love me," I said, my tone even, but not in a way that mattered when it counted. Her lips parted slightly, as if she wanted to argue, but no words came. She knew I was right. She had loved me in theory, but not in action. And love that doesn't stop you from destroying someone isn't love at all. She swallowed hard, glancing down. "I wish I could take it back." I shook my head. "You can't." The words hung between us like a final nail in the coffin. Emily wiped at her eyes, forcing a weak smile for the kids. "I'll see you Sunday," she asked softly. I nodded. "Yeah." And that was it. No final outburst. No desperate pleas. Just silence. As I got into my car, I took one last look at the house, the place where I had once imagined growing old with her. A place where our children had taken their first steps, where we had planned our future together, where I had once believed we were unbreakable. But now, it was just another building. Another chapter closed. I started the engine and pulled out of the driveway, leaving it all behind. Emily Carter had once been my wife, my best friend, my world. Now, she was nothing more than a memory. And I was finally free. The key parties had been an open secret among a select few, something they had assumed would never come to light. But now, the entire city knew, and the fallout was just beginning. As I pulled into my mother's driveway to pick up the kids, my phone rang again. "Emily." I let it go to voicemail. A few minutes later, another message appeared. I debated whether to listen. Then, with a deep breath, I pressed play. Her voice was a mix of panic and desperation. "David, what have you done?" There it was. The fear. The realization that she had lost control. "People are calling me, texting me. Everyone has seen the article. My parents, my sister, my friends. I can't even step outside." Good. She had walked into that party without hesitation. She had picked her thrill over her family without remorse. And now, she was suffering the consequences. "You went too far, David," she sobbed. "You didn't just ruin me. You ruined so many people. Do you even care?" I let out a slow exhale, listening to her unravel. Did I care? Not in the slightest. She had laughed in my face when I begged her to leave that party with me. She had brushed off my pain as if it were an inconvenience. She had gone through with her betrayal without hesitation. And now, she wanted mercy? I deleted the voicemail without responding. That night, I picked up the kids. Seeing them, Natalie, Emma, and little Mark Jr., made everything real again. The weight of the divorce, the custody battle ahead, the life I was rebuilding from the ashes of what Emily destroyed. But as they ran into my arms, hugging me tightly, I felt something else, too, a sense of peace. For the first time since that night, I knew I was doing the right thing. After putting them to bed, I sat alone in the living room, staring at my phone, debating my next move. Against my better judgment, I called Emily. She picked up on the first ring. "David," she breathed, as if she had been waiting all day. Her voice was raw, broken. I could picture her sitting somewhere dark, mascara streaked down her cheeks, a glass of wine in her shaking hand. "We need to talk," she whispered. I scoffed. Now she wanted to talk? "Please," she pleaded. "Not over the phone. In person. Just give me a chance to explain." For a long moment, I was silent. Then, finally, I sighed. "Fine." She gave me an address. A small motel just outside of town. Of course, she couldn't go home. She had nowhere to go. When I arrived, she was sitting outside her room, wrapped in a blanket, looking like a shadow of the woman she used to be. Her eyes were swollen, her lips trembling. For the first time, she looked afraid. And for once, I wasn't. I sat down across from her, arms crossed, waiting. She swallowed hard. "I messed up," she admitted. I don't know what I thought. I didn't respond. I just watched her squirm. I thought it was just a game. I didn't think it would destroy us. There it was again, that same selfish delusion. She didn't think it would destroy us. But it had. I shook my head, my voice steady. "It mattered, Emily. It mattered more than you'll ever understand." She reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "Can't we fix this?" she whispered. I stared at her for a long moment. Then, finally, I shook my head. "No, Emily. We can't." And just like that, it was over. The divorce was filed. The scandal had erupted. And Emily Carter? She was nothing more than a stranger to me now. As I drove away from the house that no longer felt like home, I realized something. This wasn't just the end of my marriage. It was the end of a blind belief that love alone could hold two people together. Love, real love, isn't just about passion or shared memories. It's about loyalty, trust, and respect. And once those are broken, there's no gluing the pieces back together. Looking back, I see the warning signs I ignored. The small dismissals, the moments of selfishness, the times she put her own desires above our vows. Love isn't just a feeling, it's a commitment, and when one person stops honoring it, the foundation cracks. For anyone reading this, especially those who have spent years, decades, building a life with someone, don't let comfort blind you to disrespect. A marriage, a partnership, any meaningful relationship requires mutual effort. The moment one person stops trying, the other is left holding something that isn't real anymore. If someone betrays you, believe them the first time. Don't excuse it, don't rationalize it, and most of all, don't beg them to stay. Some people only learn through consequences. And sometimes, the greatest act of self-respect is walking away with your dignity intact.